This is the Unrationed Podcast. My name is Evan,
I'm Josh.
I'm Tony.
and we are recording at 3:39 a.m. Mountain Time. Josh, how are you doing this morning?
I'm a little tired.
This was your idea.
This was a great idea.
Walk us through the reasoning behind meeting up at 3:30 this morning to record this episode.
Yikes. This is a little early for this explanation. However, I'll give it a shot. Yeah, so yesterday I was texting with Evan and Tony during our normal daily check-in. And as I was pondering it, Tuesdays I have a lot of conflict with my family sometimes in the morning where my kids wake up between 6:30 and 7:30, and it's kind of a wild card. And so part of it was as we're thinking about being better men, as we're trying to pursue a healthy degree of masculinity with the right amount of femininity in it, how do we pursue these things in a more realistic manner? I can't do both things all the time. So I was like, the only way to do it is do it a little bit earlier. It's like, yeah, that's even more discipline. That's even more manly. Let's get up earlier and have our podcast, and that'll be unique and differentiating. And then I woke up this morning. I was like, that was the dumbest idea I've ever had. But I think it's cool. That's we're all trying to wake up right now.
Yeah.
That's my half-baked idea that you guys for some reason obliged.
What's wrong with you guys? For Tony and I. It's 5:30 where we are at, 5:40 now where we are at. So we have a couple more hours sleep on you. And there's something to be said for coming up with ideas that make it possible to be present with your family and do the things that you desire and make a sacrifice to do that. So that sounds very Wilds and the Woods to me. And I admire that, whether we record it this time in the future or not. It's a good practice to think through those things and then actually experience them. I think following through is the biggest part. So then you know whether it's something that can be done again or not. And then you get to go on to phase 2 of the ideas of how to make it happen. Anyways, okay, let's move on to check-ins. Tony, your wild moment from the last week.
Sure. We went out to Arrowhead Provincial Park, which is like 20 minutes from the house up here, on Saturday, and got a lovely lake, some beaches. It's pretty pristine. No buildings around the lake. It's it's just a lovely big lake. First place where Wilder went canoeing, first place where he went kayaking. And it was so windy that there were like almost like ocean waves. There were little ocean waves, but it was like there were waves all over the place. So we're just out there kicking around in the water. Seagulls trying to take our picnic. What's wilder than seagulls, right? I've been wondering why there are seagulls where we are, since we're about 30 miles from the bay. Georgian Bay is 30 miles from here. They come in a long way.
Did you make the bagels joke?
The bagels joke?
It's like, what do you call a seagull that flies over the bay?
I didn't make that joke.
You can have that one for next time.
Thank you. There was just I love getting out to that park, but then on that day, just having the wind misbehaving in a way that it actually chased us away after an hour of just like all our stuff flying away. It was really beautiful. That's the wildest moment I've got.
Josh, we missed you last week.
You all as well. All right. wild moments. So I had a buddy of mine come in town this weekend, he and his family. And Sunday morning for Father's Day, we both got up early. We got up around like 4:30 or something and punched out to this peak called Blodgett Peak in Colorado Springs. So we both did that, and it was pretty awesome actually. We had a little bit of bushwhacking. We got off trail a little bit, which is always fun. I think I have a draw to get off trail a little bit, even when you have All Trails app. But yeah, it was really neat, just like standing on the top of it, being able to get a 360 view of Colorado Springs, and then farther into the mountains. So it's really pretty, perfect day, sunrise. Yeah, it was really really awesome. Came back and had pancakes with my family. That wasn't as wild, but it was really good. And I thought I'd just throw it in there.
Love it. Mine was on Father's Day as well. The kids and my wife and I went for a hike at these trails right by our house that we haven't gone to yet. And anytime it's a day that I get to choose what we do, which is like Father's Day, my birthday, or random other days, it's like, well, let's go hit the trails somewhere. And Boone doesn't do well on long car rides quite yet, so we've got to find some close trails. And these ones ended up being just like a mile and a half from our house, and I think we're gonna visit more often. My wife got me our second hiking backpack so we can carry two kids with us for Father's Day. So that was great. We got to put it to use, get on some trails, stop midway through at a bench, and just let the kids run around in the woods. And this is the first time that we've taken them in the woods and just let them run around. And it was really cool to watch them pick up rocks, pick up sticks, see a tree that's fallen over. And I find myself talking about the cycle of life of like, yeah, that tree that fell over right there is just gonna become the earth again, and become all the other trees around it. And it's really fun to have those conversations just come up based on the things that we're seeing and touching in nature. So that was a really cool moment for me as a dad on Father's Day, which Father's Day is still very new to me as well. So I brought one of my Father's Day gifts. It's a
Oh,
Dad, we
nice.
love you card.
That's adorable.
Got it on my desk.
Boone is a hell of a speller.
That's right. Kids going places.
I had it wasn't my wild moment, but Evan, you're talking about the fallen tree and talking to your kids about that reminded me that Seville driving with the kids ran across a bear that had been hit by a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, which led to a conversation about death between Seville and Wilder. Thanks to
How did
a
that
bear.
conversation flow? If
She's
you don't
still
mind
trying.
sharing.
We're still trying to figure that out. So he's 3. Um, he's curious, um, but it's yeah. I think where she was at is saying like when it does, it's you're not there anymore, right? That's like that's about it. And when she had actually had another conversation about being careful in the water this week as well.
Mm.
Um, where where she brought it home to like people also can die. Like and broaching that subject of why we need to be mindful of what we're doing. So then it's like when bugs die or when a bear does. Um, it's an interesting question, right? When you or how you approach the full life cycle.
Yeah.
Uh, we're all in the same boat, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
there's this may be just a death podcast now. I enjoy thinking about death fairly often.
It's better than a pooping podcast.
That's right. It'll at least be more meaningful. Maybe not as entertaining. um, I don't know who this was. If I did, I would for sure give them credit right here. They were talking to their child about death. And one thing also, it's worth noting here that I've already realized the best laid plans don't pan out the way that you think they will, particularly as it pertains to conversations with your kids. So, but this guy was talking to his kid about death, and I really appreciated how he like detached whatever it is that's inside of us that is eternal, and that's making some assumptions that we all believe we have something inside of us that's eternal. So um, this conversation could go a few different ways, but he's like, if you lose your hand, is that you? It's like, no. Okay, well, if you lose your arm, is that you? So it more became a conversation of how do you define who you are, which is it's very tricky questions, like who am I, and detaching that from my body itself, and also realizing that my body is housing something that I call me, and that one day will no longer exist. And I thought that was an intriguing way to start down that path of asking the question, who am I?
That's a Buddhist idea, or at least there's a book. I'm not going to come up with the title, but it's about who am I if I have no head, or something like that. And going deeper and just breaking all that down. And I read that when I was like 30, and it's pretty heady for a 30-year-old. I would be interested to know how a kid processes that idea, though it is a really compelling way to approach it.
Yeah. My grandmother passed away in in November. And so Jack, my soon to be 4-year-old, was asking questions about it. And he was asking Laura, and they were like taking a nap one day, or getting ready to take a nap. And he's like, "Where's Nana?" And she's like, "Well, she's not here anymore." It's like, "Well, where'd she go?" And we were teaching him about heaven, or have taught him about heaven. Like, she's in heaven now. And somehow I'm going to butcher the conversation completely, but somehow the word death got brought into it. And he's like, "Are you going to die?" And Laura's like, "Well, I am going to die eventually, like we all do." And he's like, "You're going to leave me?" And she just like every question he was asking, she was just like welling up with tears, because he was like, it wasn't necessarily about him. It was about like Laura, like not being there, which I think just kind of like rocked her quite a bit. Just like him not wanting to lose mommy, which is really, really special. But yeah, it's a no joke conversation. I feel like he's obsessed with dinosaurs, so it's like helped our ability to have the conversations with them, because like naturally dinosaurs don't roam the earth anymore. They are extinct. But what does extinct mean? And so now when he plays the Carnotaurus, kills the Triceratops, and he says things like Triceratops dead. So I guess death gets talked about frequently in our home because there's a lot of T-Rex carnage.
As well, there should be.
Mm-hmm.
Which death, accepting that we are going to die, is one of these steps in terms of becoming a full or mature or whole or balanced. I don't know that we've chosen a specific word for what this archetypal male figure embodies, but it seems as though accepting that we ourselves are going to die is a part of that process. Do you guys have moments that you can remember in your lives where you realized you were going to die? Like not as a child, but maybe as a child. Was there something impactful that you can recall whenever you had the realization, hey, I'm going to not be here one day. I'm going to die.
Well, actually, I don't. The most vivid time, actually, it was actually in I guess I was 28 or 29. So Laura, my wife, Jared, my brother, we were all living up in Portland, and we decided to climb Mount Hood. It was on June 9th, and supposed to be a nice day. And so Laura and I are not like, we're at the time not familiar mountaineers. We weren't super skilled. We were definitely probably the most risky people going up there, but it's supposed to be a real easy, hike up there, and then a little bit of technical ice climbing. So we're like at the last feature, which is called Pearly Gates. It's like a steeper ice climbing approach. And anyway, some like weather started to come in, like swirl around, and we decided to push forward. Anyways, when we get to the top, and all of a sudden we like get up to the summit, and we had taken 2 pictures, me and Laura, and then Jared and Laura. And between our 2 pictures, the amount of visibility just like evaporated while we're at the top of this mountain. And so all 3 of us Laura and I have never been in conditions like this. Just end up being in like whiteout conditions, like 50, 60 mile an hour winds. And we don't feel comfortable going down the same way that we came, just because we would have to build an anchor and all that stuff. And just, we felt like time was of the essence. So we had to cross over this thing called, what was it called? Something ladder. But anyways, like this super narrow passageway, it's like only like 10 yards or something like that, but it felt very treacherous, like high consequence on both sides. And we get to the top of this place called Old Chutes. And this is like a safer down climbing approach. But anyways, we're still in this whiteout condition, just wind blowing like crazy. And I remember the 3 of us like all sitting down, and we like come up with a game plan together. And my brother's like, he's the most skilled out of all of us. He's like, Laura, what's your comfort level? He's like, here's the options. Basically, I can strap you to my harness, tie a rope to you, and you can just dangle on this mountain, and I'll climb you down. And he's like, or you can down climb. And she opts to just be dangled on the side of this mountain and be strapped to Jared, and him basically down climb. No, it's not like completely vertical. Like I can't remember what the grade is, but it's extremely, extremely steep. So anyways, all 3 of us are sitting there, and we're just like looking at each other, and all of us are like, tears are coming down our eyes. And then we're just like, we got to lock it up. We got to get off this mountain, and we'll celebrate when we get down. And anyway, so I like start going first, and my wife's literally like dangling like below my brother, like 10, 15 feet below my brother on a freaking rope. And just stuff seemed very extreme and intense, but it was like a high degree of focus to get down off the mountain. And so like that moment, I get like chills when I'm thinking about it. It's like, yeah, stuff could not end up good for us today. You hear stories like this all together, and it brought a real sense of like how fragile life is. Decisions we make put us in those fragile situations, but also decisions that we don't make put us in those fragile situations. But man, we wept the entire next day. Just like it was a very emotional roller coaster. But yeah, I think that's the reason like Mount Hood in particular is like it did something inside of me that day that just like helped me respect nature, helped me respect death, helped me realize like how close we always are. We're a step away from it all the time, a misstep. So yeah, I would say that's my moment that like crystallizes just the balance of it all, for me. Anyway, and some other mountaineer would hear that story, be like, that's nothing, dude. But at that moment, it was like, okay, like I would really like to see my brother and wife again, and everybody else that's not here with me. So there's another part to that story, but I'll reserve it. We like stumbled upon this other group after we got down there. There's like blood everywhere, like literally like an hour before we got down, there was somebody who fell like 300 feet and smashed his nugget, and we like stumbled upon their group. But that'll be my cliffhanger. That'll be some other wild in the woods story.
Yeah, that brings a whole new meaning to cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Did that affect you going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think I actually think about the moment quite a bit. Like I have a lot of like I have a Mount Hood picture downstairs, and I actually was thinking about like what I want my rite of passage to be for like my boys. And like I was thinking like doing that circumnavigation when they're like 12 or something is the thing that I'd like to do with them. But it was a very defining moment. I feel like in terms of like Iron John, it was like me like looking in the pond, and like the eyes just like staring back at me. Like I think that was kind of like the moment for me. So yeah, it's definitely something that I process quite a bit.
The circumnavigation being that run around Mount Hood you did with Matt Hangen.
Yeah. So I did it.
Cool.
The first time I did it was like June of 2018 before Jack came, and then yeah, me and Matt did we did kind of a double loop broken up. But yeah, it's been a very cool spot for me. I would like you both to see it someday.
Sure,
And
that
then
can be arranged.
and then ration event.
There you go.
Tony, do you have anything that comes to mind when you think about realizing you're going to die?
Not like that. No, I mean, I do. I think about my own death regularly. And I don't know if I think about it more often than other people do, but I feel like I think about it a lot more than other people do, and that it does shape how I make decisions. That it, my I do try to approach things as your that just the cliched stuff, right? That the days are numbered, you never know when it's coming up. So you need to take your shots while you have shots to take. But no, I've avoided climbing mountains so far.
My experience is from losing somebody that was very close to me, from my mom dying whenever I was 21. Tony, I know you haven't experienced losing a friend. Does that come to mind when you think about death? Like or even Josh, to the death of close loved ones. One, I guess, have you experienced the death of a close loved one? And does that come to mind as you contemplate death on a regular basis?
Surprisingly, I don't know if this sounds like other people who have passed who have been close to me has not made me think about death as much maybe as it should, which I don't know what that means. Like if that's like hubris or something, like that's like not gonna happen to me. Or but yeah, I don't think when I ponder death, which I would agree with Tony, like I actually think about it a lot. Like in terms of like when I go to like work stuff, like succession planning or something, I think from a morbid standpoint, like, you know, my days are numbered and I'd be foolish not to plan for this. Um, but I think, yeah, not as much as it should. Like whenever I think about someone passing, it's more from like a gratitude perspective and just like remembering that person as opposed to it influencing or motivating my action to take the shots while I still have them, as Tony said.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any should there. Like that wasn't the like purpose of
Huh.
it. Like, but yeah. Tony, what were you gonna say?
it seems our culture has done a lot to separate us from death. And I would argue that's a bad thing. I think we probably all agree with that. Just as you said at the top, Evan, just that's the natural cycle of things. And not acknowledging that and being willing to sit with that reality is going to lead to some unhealthy behaviors. Just the idea of denying or repressing something so essential to the human experience. I don't think I have much more to say on that actually at the moment. What were you going to say, Evan?
Well, I think my moment is like a 5-year moment, and not necessarily like a 2 hour. Or I think I get into the habit of making, like, defining parameters for what's considered a moment. Of like, oh yeah, like a moment is just 5 minutes, or a moment is an hour, or like a single event in a single place. And so my moment, I would define it in this context as like a 5-year sitting in the room, beginning whenever I was sitting in the room with my mom as she died, and the next 5 years, which death was and is still contemplated quite often. And one of my something that comes to mind is, like, I think one of my roles as a father and as a husband is to prepare my family for my death, not just financial. I think financially is what we in the West focus on most of the time. It's like, how do we prepare our family for our death financially? But I I would I spend time thinking, how do I prepare my family for my death emotionally and spiritually? And I guess one of the guiding, so with Wild 32, it's like our guiding outcome is our wives and our children saying, you're a better husband and you're a better dad. And I think the guiding outcome whenever I think about death is, well, heck, you guys too. Like, if I were to die, that we do these, I'm like jumping all around. We do these moments of Zen where we sit in silence with our eyes closed for a minute before we record these podcasts. If I were dead, that moment of Zen would look and feel no different to you. But there's something about my presence that you still know is there whenever we do those. And that's like what a picture of preparation means, is to do, like, hold somebody's presence even after they're physically no longer there, because the experience is exactly the same. I don't know if any of this is making sense. So for me, if I sit on my floor in silence with my eyes closed and hold the presence of my mother, she is there. Because if she were in the room sitting in silence next to me, nothing would be different about that experience. Like, she's just as much there as if she were sitting there physically in that silence. So I guess that's what I'm thinking through. That's what comes to mind. And it all comes back to being silent, I guess, too, which is a form of choosing death every time we choose to sit in silence, which is a part of Wild 32. We sit in silence for 10 minutes every day. And I think sitting in silence for 10 minutes, stopping the movement that distracts us from the reality of death, like, that is one of the outcomes from that sitting in silence, is realizing we're going to die, realizing that there is such thing as a stillness that we will enter back into. So let's talk about Wild 32. We're 21 days in. How's it going? That was a hard segue from death. Is that okay?
Sometimes when you got to move on, you got to move on. There's no other way but a hard segue. Well, that's pretty good.
Things are going well. I think our our thing is holding up. Um, I'm winning the spankings.
Yeah.
6-5 to Josh. I think you're still at 2 or 3. I think you're at 2.
Well, I feel like now you gotta frame the spankings. Did we talk about the spank? Did you talk about the spankings
Tony
last
mentioned
week?
it last episode. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you know, our listeners are dedicated listeners who
Yeah,
listen to
yeah.
every episode. So yeah, the rundown on Wild 32. So 32 days, each day, 32 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes outside, 10 minutes in silence, 10 minutes reading something nourishing, no substances, stronger than sugar or stronger than caffeine. No, I guess sugar is stronger than caffeine, right? Yeah, so that counts. And then we're checking in together each day. And the spankings come from misbehaving as to substances, whether it's having a drink or an edible of some sort or a gummy bear. And when we we have the mechanism for covering for one another. If if I don't get out and work out one day, but Josh got out and did an hour, then I can borrow from him. So there's our design laid out in 30 seconds. Oh yeah, so the spankings are for misbehaving. Yeah.
And you don't really want them, but for some reason Tony wants them.
Yeah.
He wants the award for the most.
The red ass award. Yeah.
Yes.
The raw. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna win it. So Evan, you just have to stop pushing me.
Deal. I can do that.
Laura called me out the other day. We were like, she helped hold me accountable. I think it was like it was Sunday. So we had gotten the kids down for a nap and we were just gonna like hang out, watch a show. It's like 2:00 in the afternoon, which we don't get to do very often. And I had made coffee and I went to like just grab something quick to eat, and I grabbed like a bar, and I can't remember what kind of bar it was. We normally have like pretty healthy bars, not like a ton of like added sugar. And I like sat down. She's like, "Oh, you get yourself a little cheater treat," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Why'd you check that label?" And so I like look at it. It's got like 6 grams of added sugar, and I was like, "Damn you!" And so I like put it back, and we had these like RX bars, which are just like dates and no added sugar, but there's 16 grams of sugar in it, and there's no added. And so I had that, which was delicious. But I appreciated her accountability and also just like joking with me. But I have dabbled in non-alcoholic beer, which is underwhelming. However, a good practice.
Most of them are underwhelming. I will say that.
And I've got my version of a non-alcoholic peanut butter cup, which is a no sugar peanut butter cup. The non-alcoholic beers of candy. Left over from a keto stint earlier this year.
Father's Day, my wife did make peanut butter cups for me on Father's Day. So that was a spanking for Father's Day. Those were not keto. They were delicious though.
Delicious.
I think you're gonna get the award, man.
I know.
Yeah, so 21 days of Wild 32. I was thinking yesterday, this seems like the foundations of a rule of life for me. I've never created a rule of life. I'm assuming you two are familiar with a rule of life from your growing up years, which is a guide for your daily life, essentially. And it's something that the community I'm a part of encourages for everybody that's a part of the community, but something that I've never got around to doing. And it's something that I'm really considering now, having been doing this Wild 32 for 21 days, because I feel as though I've got a reliable rhythm for my day, or at least markers for my day. Some 5 things that I know are going to happen each day. And there's like a peace that comes with knowing that I'm going to sit in silence for 10 minutes today, and I'm going to read for 10 minutes today. And these are things that I desire to do, which is worth noting. These are not things that I feel as though I'm being made to do, or I have to do, or that I'm doing for a reason that's other than. There's something within me that wants to do them. So I find joy in them. So worth noting all of those things. I think that's important when considering a rule of life or considering engaging in some sort of daily practices. Is there an aspect of joy that it brings you? And so I'm finding joy in these disciplines. I'm finding joy in these check-ins. I'm finding joy in the silence and reading and having the space to do that. And then also that space is communicated between my wife and I. It's like, no, I got to exercise for 32 minutes today. It's like my wife, Grace, encourages me to go do these things because it's a part of my daily life, and not something that's like, well, hey, could you do? And it's like we kind of are building our lives around this rhythm. I want to call it a sacred rhythm, but I think people define sacred differently. It feels like a sacred rhythm to me and for our family. So those are my thoughts on Wild 32. And I'm really finding joy through these practices.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I've done like different stints of disciplines like this and practices, but this time around, for whatever reason, there's been, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where most of my stuff happened like after 10 o'clock, which was not intelligent for me. But the thought exercise kept going, the thought kept going through my mind, where it's like, okay, how will I feel when I wake up in the morning? Like, will I regret doing these disciplines? Will I regret having less sleep? And every time being able to ask those questions, like, I was happier after I finished it when I laid my head down on the bed, on the pillow. And like, there's I think, to your point, like this joy and this peace as I'm like finishing the day to start the next day, knowing that I put in the work to be a little bit better. My wife was sleeping, my kids were sleeping, and it was just me and myself to make the decision. And I think that was really, really rewarding. And I think when we were starting this too, I think it was cool that Father's Day was this past Sunday, and that Laura wrote me a letter for Father's Day, and she wrote something that I've read multiple times over because it's the motivation behind this. She's like, I love watching you become a better father all the time. And I was like, man, that's, this is why we're doing these things, to be a better man, to be a better father, to be a better husband. And she also said, like, I'll always be here to support you and challenge you. And it's just like, this stuff that we're doing is necessary, because nowhere else in our society are we encouraged or like pushed to do that. I mean, I can't say nowhere else. There's plenty of spots that society is, but it's things like this that we got to take the action, and hopefully we get a little bit of feedback like that throughout our journey, that we're on the right path.
To your point, Josh, it's pretty easy for us to go through our lives without doing this stuff if we don't want to.
Yeah.
It's super easy to just stay comfortable and make the easier decisions. And while we began this portion of the conversation talking about the spankings, we're making better decisions as a whole. And my thing with the spankings is that whole consistency is the hobgoblin of the small mind. Is that's I'm comfortable focusing on progress rather than perfection, as I learned in the rooms of AA. I've made more than 100 better decisions over the last 3 weeks than I would have if we weren't doing this. I'm pretty sure that that is correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. And our lives are, for the most part, the accumulation of millions of decisions. So to be able to start stacking up more better decisions builds the momentum and makes it easier that better decisions can be made in the future. And like you're saying, Josh, we can become better versions of ourselves, better fathers through the disciplines.
We've also sat in silence now for 3.5 hours this month, which is a pretty nuts. 10 minutes a day, 6 days would be an hour. Tony, you looked very like you were questioning my math, so I started questioning my math.
I appreciate you working that out loud.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So we've spent 3.5 hours sitting in silence doing nothing, which I feel as though society is definitely not encouraging us to do nothing, at least in a way that also is life-giving. Yeah. It's not a pleasure-seeking nothing. It's a nothing, which is, yeah, a really cool metric to even just know. As we do this, at the end of this, we'll have spent 320 minutes sitting in silence, and then combined, that's a lot of sitting in silence.
A lot of not contributing to society.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, no,
go ahead, Josh.
We were so we do our daily check-in with each other, and I don't know if it was 2 days ago, I texted Evan and Tony and was just like letting them know that historically, like, I rarely turn down a drink. Like, if somebody's like, "Hey, you want to have a drink?" I'm like, sure, why not? And it's like a mindless, like, yeah, I just want to have, be able to be in person with somebody, cheers with somebody. And I was sharing some reflections on it. But Tony, this is more direct towards you. Actually, it's fascinating how much I think about you two during this time period to draw on like different strengths of the group. And so when it comes to like the drinking or no substances, I was like, Tony hasn't had a drink since 2010. I was like, for me to make a daily decision for 32 days to not have a drink, like that's not that big of a deal. Like, I will not be upset. My day will not be altered if I don't have a drink today. But at the same time, your life will be altered if you stack that up multiple days in a row to choose not to have a drink. And so, anyways, like for these different disciplines, being able to draw on the strengths of other people and try and like harness them, I think is something really, really powerful that until you were talking, Tony, I didn't realize like how much I think about you two during this time period, which is pretty neat.
It's definitely part of the deal, right? Is doing this together and providing that touch of accountability where when I'm making the decisions, I am often making the decision, despite my affinity for spankings, I don't want to fail, right? I don't want to be the weak link on our team, in our little tribe doing this thing, right?
Thanks for listening to the Unrationed podcast. If you'd like to take part in a Wild 32, become a better man, visit wildsinthewoods.com to learn more.
Nice.
All right. Peace
Well,
out, guys.
see ya.
All right. Later, gents. Good talking
Later.
to you.
Same. Peace.